Naturally. So we're here. It's another day in 2020, and
hot day in hell as usual. My cat's screaming.
We have a lot going on. We have the Project 50 telethon tomorrow, which is going to be 8 hours of streaming, various content. We're going to have some discussion panels, some fun stuff, just all kinds of different things. It's going to be really great all day. I'm going to drop the link for that real quick. So Project 50 is this is like a rent relief thing. So you're going to want to check this out because we're going to be doing this from 3 Eastern into late in the evening tomorrow. And we'll keep going as long as people are watching and donating. Y'all want to keep us up till 2 a.m. playing Fall Guys? We'll do it. Yeah, everybody tune in tomorrow. Again, starting at 3 Eastern. Here's the link. I'm going to leave that up for a few more seconds as I get into the topic, and then I'll take it down. That's the Project 50 Rent Relief Fundraiser Telethon. It's going to be fucking lit. All right. So, I think a lot of people, and Grav, I'm really interested to get your opinions on this in a minute. But I think a lot of people are kind of coming to terms with a sort of disconnect that exists as it pertains to violence in our society. Because here's the thing, right? We all tend to agree that there are occasions where violence is justified in a self-defense kind of situation or things like that, to some extent. Now, there are some people that don't even agree with that. But when it gets messier than that, a lot of people struggle with, is it justified for me to commit violence, for this reason or that reason or this or that? And the issue that we're seeing is that basically, globally, statistically, the human appetite for violence has been on the decline for hundreds of years. Okay.
Right.
We're murdering each other at random less.
Yeah.
But the people that reject this, the people that aren't in that massive group of us that are becoming less violent over time, are putting on uniforms that justify their violence and things like that, or they're just becoming white nationalists. But the thing, the issue.
Well, you and I were talking about this last night.
Yeah.
In DMs, we were just talking. Believe it or not, Kennedy and I talk behind the scenes as friends sometimes.
Wow.
And we were talking specifically about you say violence is going down, you say these crime rates are going down, but my question for you then was, yeah, but to what extent have we just legitimized the psychopaths and the violent people by putting them in uniforms? And are we counting people who are victims of war or people who are victims of police brutality?
We are, because even the appetite for that violence has gone down. It used to be a lot easier to recruit large militaries, especially 100 years ago. Virtually any country in the world could just say, we got to fight. And most people would just sign up. And that has completely changed globally in terms of when you look at the public perception of do I want to fight in a war versus not? That has been on the decline as well. So the average person is less violent than ever. But we have these extremely violent reactionary actors who don't like the way that the world is going, who are legitimizing their violence through the state and tools like that, and are able to commit massive violence against us as a result. Grav, you had something to say.
Well, what I was just going to say, I was going to give a spicy, I guess, statement maybe that Manifest Destiny never ended.
Totally did not. Yeah.
Because after, what was it? After we conquered the West Coast, we tried, what was it? The Monroe Doctrine with wanting to basically South America is under United States control. The whole world powers flipping to the United States favor instead of the United Kingdom. So because of that, it's still been our job to act as the global policeman. And I always think back to the education I got in the quote unquote liberal haven, New York City. And even there, they were yeah, would you rather be the global policeman or would you not? And there was this weird sort of both siding I was getting in the 8th grade about it. But it's also the way we justify violence throughout the years, right? It's yeah, we get taught about manifest destiny and how that's like a bad thing, but then we just go, oh yeah, well, you know, hey, it
So we
happened.
stopped, and it's good. It's all good now.
It's just
Everything's
brushed
happy
off, you
now.
know. And
Yeah.
we treat like the whole like us genociding Native Americans as like mythological beings that came by like the dinosaurs, whatever, and just suddenly like went to near extinction, right?
Yeah, well, and I think you know, this idea that the state propagates itself with violence is not new either. You know, it's not just in the case of Manifest Destiny in the United States, or, you know, even ongoing conflicts. You know, if you look at like the Wet'suwet'en tribe, you know, earlier this year, or the Standing Rock tribe, or Wet'suwet'en Nation, I should say, rather, forgive me. You know, these conflicts are still happening. This sort of sense of dominion is still very present, and it is still very much enforced by violence. You know, we had people, you know, as recently as last night, like we were talking about right before we started streaming, you know, kettling protesters and hitting them with tear gas inside of, you know,
Right.
the LAPD, kettling protesters and hitting them with tear gas while they were trapped inside of, you know, a tunnel, like with nowhere to go, which is,
Horrifying.
I mean, horrifying, beyond inhumane. You know, this is the kind of thing where this is like a human rights violation happening just inside of our borders, and it's okay because it's the state who I guess we implicitly trust, and it's very disheartening to see the rhetoric around these things.
I mean, I just want to also add, like, the way the media presents it too is also a big part of the picture, because state can commit violence, and if the media doesn't put attention to it, there's still traditional media is still extremely powerful. Traditional media is what got Joe Biden as our nominee instead of what 3 states prior that had more diverse populations, you know, or had more like representation of just immigrants and all this other stuff, right? Like all these different cultures and groups came together of minorities of oppression who came through and voted for Bernie Sanders or stuff like that. All of a sudden you have Obama, Pete, all of them, and then the media just kind of chime in like, you know, Joe Biden won one state, you know? So it's like the media has proven that they still have a lot of sway. And when you have figures now like Tucker Carlson and other such media personalities on screen, they can justify the state doing violence, even when right in front of them, the state is committing crimes. I mean, we saw it when the protests were originally being filmed at, and the police were shooting at the reporters, and they still kind of have just been like glanced over all of that, you know, even when it happens right in their face. So the distrust just grows, and then it just further entrenches anybody who already believes in that sort of narrative, and then just further grows distrust when the media actually reports something that's of importance, right?
Yeah, I mean, the media is absolutely complicit in this, and it's very easy to see why, right? Like these people in, you know, the upper echelons of CNN and MSNBC and like, you know, the Anderson Coopers, like they're rich as shit. They have way, way more in common with Donald Trump than you or I. And at the end of the day, like their entire culture is structured around, you know, what the bourgeoisie think and what the bourgeoisie want, you know, and arguably, you know, some of them are working for the money and are more petit bourgeois than like proper bourgeois, but it doesn't change the reality that like culturally speaking, these people reflexively defend each other first.
Correct.
And they would much rather believe in these like institutions that they run than, you know, really ultimately have to reflect upon themselves, sacrifice things that are making them, you know, very, very comfortable, and really own that they have contributed to these problems and that they're the bad guys. And I don't know that they're capable of that. So it seems to me a lot easier to just lie to myself and then publish, you know, shitty, under-researched, you know, media drivel that makes my owners happy.
I think go ahead, Kennedy.
Well, I wanted to ask y'all, I think that there's like I think that there is a sort of crisis occurring about the nature of violence itself.
Yeah.
And that's part of what I'm getting at when I say, like, I do still believe that the appetite for violence is going down, because here's what I believe that the crisis that we're facing is that we who are relatively left, and this includes liberals in this case, have been, and it includes actually moderate conservatives for the most part as well, have been like moving away from the violent tendencies, as I say. And so when we think about violence, we philosophize about it. We talk about violence in these, you know, kind of abstractish and like, okay, we have to, so it's like trolley problems and shit, basically, right?
Right.
When anybody like left of like Donald Trump is talking about violence, right? But on the other hand, looks like we got Brandon in the house. Maybe.
Possibly.
But on the other hand, the people that are on the other end of the like political spectrum in regards to violence, like fascists, cops, people like that, they don't have the same hesitance. Basically, like, I feel like anyone like left of Mitt Romney, when you are in that situation where you're about to possibly commit violence on someone else, you stop and like kind of consider it, or like you want to believe that it's possible to take that moment to stop and consider it. But the people that are doing the violence to us don't have that philosophical moment. They don't have a hesitation moment where they stop to think about the like greater implications about what they're doing. And like, it's important to note, because I think a lot of people feel like I just have to be in that perfect situation and then the violence will be justified and I'll know I need to do it. But that situation will never come. I'm just going to tell you that. That situation
I think, though, that
never come.
Like the fascists on the right who are, you know, killing us and torturing us and doing human rights atrocities within our borders right now, you know, those people spend all of their time actually inventing narratives that justify the violence, right? They invent things to get mad about, and then they just wait until they find something that loosely fits that narrative so that they can enact this like violence that they fetishize and have been wanting actively to do. And I think that that is partially a cultural issue, and also fundamentally a constitutional issue. Not only the Constitution of the United States, but Constitution of the people themselves. You know, they do not tend to be people who spend a lot of time actively empathizing with others. You know, these are not people who are like spending their time coming up with ways to connect with strangers. These are people who spend their time coming up with stories where they save the day by killing strangers. And, you know, I don't think the left has no one like that. I do think actually we have like sort of.
I mean, I don't think that we can. Here's the thing is that people forget this a lot when people start to fantasize about like being in the situation. Again, this is why I said that situation, that perfect situation of violence will never come.
Right.
Even I knew someone who like a burglar broke into his home. He was like, this guy's an old man. That is the homeowner. The burglar is much younger than him, beats the shit out of him. The homeowner ends up in the ensuing struggling, shooting and killing this guy. And he was completely distraught over it.
Yes.
He was filled with grief and remorse. Like this belief that like you're going to find yourself in a situation where you can do the violence and not feel bad is like, that's never coming. It's never coming, period.
Actually feel nothing about killing somebody is way lower than the number of people who think they're going to feel nothing about killing somebody. And I actually, you know, we talk about this. I want to talk about two things as related to the shooter night before last. This in particular, yes, extremely yes. And it's not just that kid's mom, there's the entire culture that talks about like how there's going to be a civil war, how liberals want a civil war, you know, how they're going to come take our guns. It's like this entire very, you know, reactionary defensive culture, all of which culminated in this, you know, literal child killing people. And I think about that. And one of the things that makes me so fucking sad about the situation, and I, you know, brace for impact, sympathy for the devil here, but like that person was 17 years old. 17-year-olds do not have that ability to plan ahead, to really like anticipate what's going to happen. They're very impulsive, they're very heated, they're very emotional. That is why we use them to kill other people overseas in our armies. That is why we recruit them out of high schools, because that is arguably the age where it's easiest to get somebody to kill somebody else. But at the end of the day, that kid is going to have to live the rest of his life knowing he did that.
We don't have to justify any of his beliefs, ideas, or actions to say that he's a child soldier.
Exactly.
Unequivocally. Like,
and that's a fucking tragedy unto itself.
Right. I think we all like generally know that child soldiers are bad regardless of the cause that they fight for. That it's a thing that shouldn't exist on that nature, and that like the people who are in those positions are being exploited. It doesn't justify the actions that they take per se, but it does, like, we have to like realize that like this is the nature of the white supremacist civil war. It's exploitation all the way down. That's all they know, and it's all they believe in.
Yeah.
Like, just to put it bluntly.
And that's a fucking tragedy, you know? Like, every single part of this, no matter which direction you're looking at it from, is just fucking sad. You know, and so we talk about, like, is violence ever justified? You know, maybe sometimes, but I don't think it ever feels good.
Here's what I believe. I believe that some truth is a paradox, and that the truth of violence will always be paradoxical. I believe that even the most justified acts of violence will not be justified in like a grand scheme sense of like how a lot of us know that the world should be, that we shouldn't be doing these things to each other, period. Like, and so I think that like reconciling those two halves of that truth is really challenging. And I think it's challenging a lot of people that I personally know on the left when they're looking at stuff like Kenosha, you know, because they know that they don't want to do violence to anyone, period.
Yeah.
And that like they want to have compassion for every human to some extent, but they also know that the violence is coming to people that don't deserve it. And that like at a certain point, it's like these questions become huge. And this is like, I mean, the people that came back from World War II, a lot of those soldiers, they may have been fighting the Nazis, but they didn't all come back and feel good about what they'd done 100%. You know what I mean? Like, there's always going to be this grappling. And imagining that we can somehow move past the grappling, because there will be a point where the fascists are so overt and disgusting that like you no longer feel a thing about it. If you're empathetic, you're just always going to feel a thing about it. Like, that's just how it is. And it fucking is a shitty situation to be in for us as like the other side of this conflict in a way.
Yeah. We feel it more in some ways, I think. Like the pain of it. We feel more pain for them than they feel for us.
And again, when I say conflict, I'm talking about, I just want to be clear, I'm talking about a cultural conflict between the people who are like have been for a long time moving away from violence, and the reactionary minority of mostly white people, mostly white men, that are saying, no, we need to keep things society needs to stay based around the stick. Yeah. We need to have a society that stays based around the king is the guy who kicked your ass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, this idea that power needs to be a resource we compete over. You know, this idea that there is something, you know, sacred and holy to power itself, which is fundamentally wrong, in my opinion. You know, power is kind of an accidental output of a very complicated system. And whether and how we use power over other people.
Grab, what do you think?
I'm sorry. Let me cut out real quick.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. So
you might have a take.
Yeah. No, we lost Grab for a second there.
So look, I listen. For anyone who watches this now or later, I'm not trying to say that like I have the answers for you. What I'm trying to say is that this is a more complicated question than some people are giving it the credit for, and this goes to both people who are like, I'll grab a gun and go shoot a cop today, like, Like that, it's more complicated than you think, bud. But this also very much applies, and perhaps even more so applies to the people that are saying we have to empathize with these Nazi killers to an excessive extent. We have to empathize with all humans to some extent, but we also have to draw a line, because the problem is that we're looking at a really serious situation where, on the one side, we're saying that there's one ideology that can't fit in our world, and that's fascism. Okay, like,
because
honestly,
it's inherently antisocial.
I would even say, like, in my idealist of worlds, if there's like a neighbor state next door that's really trying to do the human capitalism thing, and Elizabeth Warren is in charge and whatever, or like, I wouldn't be like, we have to bomb them out of existence, we can't tolerate these people, right? Like, even though I'm a staunch socialist, I'm not calling for the deletion of any ideology except one, and that's fascism. And the reason why is simple, is because when the fascists have any power, and this does not have to mean that they control everything. This is one of the places I think where people stumble up on this. They do not have to control everything. Having just one fascist in Congress is enough to potentially get laws passed that hurt people and like ruin people's lives and kill people. All right. So like, this is why fascism is so dangerous as an ideology. So the thing is that the problem is, in their world, fascism is the only ideology that's left. That's the problem. That's why we can't tolerate those people and like give them space and blah, blah, and all that stuff. Because when you do that, that's what leads to Kenosha. When you look at something like Kenosha and you say, oh my God, how did this happen? It happened by us letting Richard Spencer be a fucking talking head in the media. It happened by us letting George Bush get away with war crimes. It happened by us like just washing over fascism over and over again, because too many of us are waiting for a perfect fascism that'll never come, where we have a guy who comes out on stage and says, Hitler is my best friend. He puts on a swastika armband. He says, I'm swastika president. You know, like, you're looking for a situation where that's the case. That's never going to come. Like, fascism is going to continue to be this slow roll that's produced by many actors, some of whom have other sides to them that seem good. And like, we can't keep waiting for this idyllic version of fascism to start calling it fascism and to start saying it's wrong and it's not acceptable, because these people are literally killing people. This isn't a joke. This isn't a hypothetical situation.
I agree with you, Kennedy. And also, Chloe, I actually want to challenge you here. I don't think there is such a thing as too much empathy. And this is Chloe Kravitz saying, empathize too much, and some people will take advantage of your empathy till you have none left to give. All things in moderation, even the good qualities. I want to challenge that idea. I think actually there is no such thing as too much empathy. I think it is important, especially when you are fighting people, when you are considering whether you are going to do violence to somebody, to empathize with them. I think we should always exhaust every possible nonviolent resource we have available to us before we fall back on violence. And even then, we should empathize with the people that we hurt. You know, if you're going to hurt somebody, I think you actually have a moral obligation to empathize with them and to understand where they're coming from and to know exactly why, in spite of it being fundamentally a bad thing to hurt another human being, you are going to do it anyway. And I think if you can't do that, you probably are not well-versed enough in what you are doing to be able to justify your violence at all, frankly.
I'm going to be real, too. Too many Americans see empathy as transactional.
Yes.
So they say, well, this one time I gave a homeless guy $10 and then I saw him drunk later, and that spoiled my empathy. If you were actually empathizing with him and not seeing it as a transaction, then you wouldn't care what he did with that $10. You would just give him the $10 because you empathize with the plight of the homeless, and you would not have conditions, qualifications, or expectations for that empathy. And this applies to all types of empathy. A lot of people, you see this is like what quintessentially makes a bad ally, right? A lot of the time is somebody who comes in and says, well, I empathize, for instance, with trans causes and trans rights. But I don't think that y'all should be making up new pronouns. That's just weird.
Yes.
Like you're saying my empathy comes with a demand.
Yeah.
You're expecting it to be transactional. Empathy cannot be transactional if it's genuine.
No, and I would actually go so far as to say that that sort of transactional framing of empathy is itself kind of at the root of fascism, right? That is an internalized kind of fascism where your kindness, where your empathy, where your gentleness are reserved for people who have earned it, right? But the only difference there is, that you have a lower bar for earning your empathy or whatever, and we can't do that. We can't do fascism light and actually come out of this, having truly won once and for all. This will only work when we fundamentally change the way we are interacting with other people to the point where it doesn't matter if they're taking advantage of us. It doesn't matter if they're being mean to us. It doesn't matter, if they are going to try to hurt us afterwards. We help them anyway, just because that is what we do, regardless of the other person. And I think that is like the only real antidote to, this rising tide of fascism in the Western world, is for us to really wholly understand that, like, we actually do have to love each other. We actually do have to forgive each other. We actually do have to, like, Orb Mom, Marianne Williamson, hug each other and love each other through this.
Biden said it. Come on.
Huh?
This shouldn't even be controversial to say anymore. Biden said it. Biden got up on the DNC stage and said we all had to fucking hug it out to get rid of the darkness. Like, if Biden could say it, we can certainly say it. Like, if y'all have a problem with us saying that love is the answer, then, like, you're taking yourself way too seriously, period. And you're not like, you've lost the ability to communicate with other humans. I'm just gonna be honest. Like,
yeah, very much so, though. I mean, like, we have to be better than the people we're trying to defeat. We cannot let ourselves become them in the process. That defeats the entire purpose. Like, we have to do the hard thing. And I've said this before, I will say it again. This is like my mantra, and it will always be my mantra around this. I am way less impressed by who you are willing, or what you are willing to kill for, than what you are willing to die for. This is not about your.
I'm not impressed personally. I'm not impressed by either. I'm impressed by what you're willing to put your time into. Dying is an instantaneous act. Like,
we're talking about commitment, right? Like, I am way more impressed by a commitment that is willing to die than a commitment that is willing to kill. And yes, most of all, what I want to see is a commitment that is willing to show up and do work, real work in the community, mutual aid style.
Like, it's easy to imagine for a lot of leftists, it seems like on Twitter, it's easy for y'all to imagine yourselves as like the martyr who will start the war against fascism or whatever. But you're just going to be Willem Van Sprunsen. You're just going to be a guy who died, and a few people kind of go, dang, he had a point. But everybody else is just like, wow, yeah, I'm not doing that. And that's what's going to happen, like, if you try to make yourself that person. Whereas on the other hand, like, every organization in your town that's doing real work has a spreadsheet that's behind by a month. Like, and, I think that, like, part of the fetishization of, like, just going out in a blaze of glory is, like, the fetishization of not having to do significant work to make these things happen. And, like, you just need to, like, be willing to put some time in, honestly, in my opinion. Like, if you're really worried about these things, like, it's a commitment of, like put in that 2 hours a month, and it adds up. Just do the small things. Do that little bit of backyard gardening and give a tomato to your neighbor. Like, all that shit adds up a lot. And it'll, like, even out to a lot more than just, like, a weird blaze of glory. Let me tell you. So, in any case, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. As I said, this is going to be a short stream. Again, Project 50 tomorrow. 8 hours roughly of content, or more possibly, because like I said, if y'all are watching and donating, we will play Fall Guys till 1 or 2, 3 in the morning. We'll just keep going. So Project 50, check it out. We are going to have just a lot of interesting stuff. If you want fun, we're gonna have fun. If you want serious, we're gonna have serious. We're gonna have a women's housing panel with some incredible guests. We're gonna have just a lot of different events. So like, tune in. You don't want to miss it. And if you want to support us, that's patreon.com/notsafe. Every dollar goes to supporting truly independent media. And we appreciate y'all. And we'll see you next time.
I'm gonna be Brandon.
Be Brandon.
Bye.